So this is the seventh sill. All the mares are dreaming. Their frames flash moonlit silver. Platinum horseshoes are anvil mallets pounding sleepless ice. Their colts stumble through the ringing and exhale steam into the grass. There is no love like this, muzzle bone grinding into silver hawk. The colt's dependence and desperation. The moon is a blood ring dangling in starlight. A cast iron hand shatters the tiny bones to spark and glitter to dust. In daylight, I stood once among these horses, sugar cubes in my outstretched palm. Now the wide eyes shine in beaming bloodlight. Human kindness has been forgotten, and one risks being trampled in that blindness. The unforgiving earth yawns up its graves. Dead walk among the sycamores, chanting war songs past midnight as they hunt the living who have forgotten them, every one among these black groves. On a hickory stump once I sang the night through, and when sleep overtook me, I was protected by the horses, their dignity, their broad backs and muscular legs. Now I sleep alone, the stars riot overhead, and a mad red god claims dominion over swarms of the dead. Wormwood, the star shines bright, the waters turn bitter. We'll try to drink, but a panic will seize us, a desperation no mother's songs will soothe. If there is justice, it is in this circle of ice and drought, in the anarchy of the beast as they break apart, in the omen unyielding, terrifying angel that weeps with a trumpet in his arm for transgressions forgotten, unwept, and still to come. This next one's, I suppose, kind of a nativity. Yeah, that's all I'll say about what the rest of it speak. There's kind of a temporal break in the middle where it jumps to a scene later, and I'll kind of just motion that when the time comes. It's called Joseph's Blues. No day left to pay the debtors owed, so misery slid the mountain on her sled. Tryst born lately in Bethlehem, the dog star howling in the manger. As you were, you shadow puppets, married to your graves, the trampling feet and notch bitten in its ear, the kind Redeemer none, nobody saves, who bore his Lord when even mother faltered, and Joseph brined in wholesome sacrificial zeal, counts transgressions with each gram of mill. Married to their graves, might some kind pilgrim rub the neglected bone and pray to him? Great red finger eye burns like brimstone, a carpenter's lullaby. And then this is a little later. The house falls apart. Dolls crash through the ceiling. This must be what rapture sounds like. The structural philosophy fails in theory, in practice, in time. The nick of it, the nerve. This next poem's called Laurel. It's after the bit in Ovid's Metamorphoses with Daphne and Apollo, where Apollo kind of teases Cupid, right? And says, you know, your arrows aren't as great as mine. And Cupid says, oh yeah? So, you know, makes him in love with somebody, makes her repulsed by him. She flees and turns into a tree, and you know, and then so the laurel that she turns into is kind of thought to be the symbol of like poetic excellence. But this poem's actually through the point of view of her father Peneus, about the loss. So Laurel. I'll recall what I can never have of you, fleeing through summer daffodils on bent stems and lion's mane that wavered over new growth. My eyes, my head, my heart, pure, wizened and vacant, linger anywhere but that mad filling. The soil that cast its spell and petrified the tender rind, the wild, wind-swift remembrance. The heartstring withers and snaps, the limbs rot toward a new-formed birth, and the field flourishes, a lattice work of wildflowers, amaryllis, evergreen. Should your spirit pass this way again, weary from its flight, lie in the shade of that fat black oak. Pay no mind to the knotted scowl it wears, are browning leaves that blanket the mud. They will weather in the empty cradle, and all arms fold back into earth. Don't worry about the archer who missed his mark, fell under the poison of honeysuckle and sweet forlorn blossom, God made feeble by the vengeful thorn. He wept and sang a song and passed his way, the futile river roaring behind him. This one's called Arabella, New Mexico. We came for Black Mesa and the moon was blaring. Scrawny coyotes crossed the highway and disappeared. The road turned to copper-colored dirt, to cattle guards and cacti, sage and catastrophe illuminated in the pale headlamp glare. Shining bare skeletons all night. Road as far as we could see, echoes into the great expanse of desert and nothingness. But we knew it would end with sunrise, mirrored in the arroyo. Scaly beasts slithered back into the alpenglow, into the heat haze of Arabella. This next one's called Eugene, Oregon, by the light of the supermoon. Tonight the moon is a spinster's silver face. Up and down the street, dogs haggle for the pearl in her smile. The staggering drunk in Alton Baker Park, like a band leader, wells Fernando over their howling, his slurred barks enticing only the slightest kindness in the icy leer. Is he lost, merely strolling alongside the Willamette, the emperor of May, with his imagined clothes shed and chucked pell-mell in the frigid waters? Brine and mist and river vapor, he mimics its shuffle, wolfman, vagrant, Jekyll the troubadour, her hide finally soothed by the balm of magnolia. Her face is silver that sparkles when he turns his gaze. As he reaches his grand fermata, thrusting his arms as if he could span these miles and embrace her light, coy as ever she dips under the cover of a cloud, he falters, lost in onsetting dark. Is she giggling or shaking her head behind her veil? On either side of the street, sleeping bags twitch in the pale emerging glare and come to life, their skins red as gerbera. This next one's called Shampoo. You linger only so long as the scent of orchid and the humidity outside your shower stall, which sticks to my skin in fragrant and alien blossoms. What a dream to wake from. And in my wine, I had swirled it like a sea of purple petals. How the bees swarmed me, foolish, stammering of my innocence, the wild nomenclature of desire coded in me, dragging the flesh over irrigated foothills against the compass needle throbbing in my blood, which into evening sang orchid. This next one I haven't read before. It's kind of got heroic couplets. It's called "In Sympathy for the Great Plains Farmer." It's kind of about how farmers are getting screwed over here lately. In sympathy for the Great Plains Farmer. He'll sweat another night over the old abacus, each bead cascading where it chooses, counting heads of spotted lambs and cows in order to abstract the year's sorrows. Drought that turned the summer wheat field to a scab, their youngest shrinking to nothing in the crib. Debts that mount like towers in the sky. Often at sunset, he takes inventory of each dream descending on each shooting star, foreclosing them one after another, until life from all that loss seems zero-sum, cursed, benighted, always quarrelsome. Sometimes he stares across the parched plain and wipes his handkerchief across his brow, wan dreaming like a semi-trailer crashing its load on highways that slither over the backs of the dead. This next poem's called The Mint. It's about a friend of mine who lost his daughter. Lament. Night has carried her breath from her like gypsy moths dancing in snow. that floated down the lattice while she dreamt of pink-tinged canna lilies opening in sunrise. And out in the field a hollow bell rang, its song drifting over the red wheat. By the moon's dim lantern, her mother's storm-filled throat spilled harmony. The truant spirit with sly white fingers poured like milk through stray grains of rye, milk in the highway that stretched tonight where friendless street lamps burn. It opened over empty rooms of childhood, the tire swing twisting from the willow, and the dreams of her father who rises each day bearing witness to mile-long stretches of grasslands and the gray dearth of flowers, whisper with the shivering wheat of her departure, how drought will blister summer's harvest and wildfires weave the ashes into sky. This next one's called Bounty. It's for Martha Swart. It's an elegy for my grandmother who passed away in 2011. Wrinkled and resting in the red dirt, your face burns still, shining my path once more to this old plot of earth. Scraping your spoon against the dust bowl here, you learned that anything could yield us worth. So the house was cluttered with hoarded spoil. Old threadbare coats, boxes of dress patterns, cans of coins and hard candy, commodity food more than could ever feed a family. A neighbor had bartered with Grandpa for a junked short school bus's hollowed frame, and you insisted that be salvaged too, serving as the family cellar, half buried in the backyard among peach trees and empty refrigerators. The twilight sun now cast its skeletal hull in corroded sepia flakes. I walk inside and your ghost shimmers from the shelf in pieces of broken cannon jars. We'll eat what we can and we'll can what we can't, you'd say, stuffing them full of preserves. I see my face reflected in the dull gleam from shards half-caked in the rust hues of my home. Winter is a long season to pass over us, your endless lessons about storing nuts and eating what we can. The absence of the sound is a shadow overtaking me. When I step outside, the grain silo looming over the house mirrors the setting sun into my eyes, and I have to shield them against all that silver catching fire. The next one's called Gotebo, 2005. Gotebo is a little rural town in Oklahoma. It's named for a cemetery there. Gotebo. It is freezing. The air tastes like scrap iron. We're on the turnpike headed to a cemetery, lone in the shaded overgrown country grove, to say goodbye to one who speaks now only from the grass, spitting her gray tongue through soft soil among uniform stony rows. The thumbnail sketches of those arched mountaintops that break the horizontal plane. And it's all she'll ever say to me, this 95-year-old great aunt of yours. And all I'll know from the 2 hours I listened to her speak, back before the war, at your family's farm, the rolling acres adequate escape from the throng of in-laws to be, their sharp-tongued surveys of this new boyfriend you had nailed to their door as a manifesto against the dogma of familial custom. Sorry. Better for me to pace along the ice-coated barbed wire fence, the cattle-breathing fog trails there by the dissected green tractor. And this is where I belong, I thought, my home among solitary orange fence stakes and muted angelic cows. Now there you are. Aunt Becca found me. She laid her bony, shriveled hand on my shoulder and sighed heavy, pulling herself to my side, always refusing any walker, crutch, or chair. Sure is pretty, ain't it? She coughed, shivering like her livestock, standing frail and unsure in the bitter cold. She stood beside me as the cattle cried, and we stared out over the canyons and pasture. And this next little bit's in her voice. Try to tell the wrinkled and old how time is an enemy and the cards are stacked. Tell one so close to sleep that life is too long, the right hand never strong enough for its work. that no frontiers lie undiscovered, and all was mastered so long before you were born, that now your travel seems tainted, the path too worn. Someday you'll stand among the young, and your hands, too twisted and sore for their task, will point them to country so vast that a child can never see it. Look where I'm pointing. Can you see it? Our shadows fell long over the snow. The prairie wind shrieked its stark song through the blackjack's gnarled knuckles, consuming the cattle and her trembling moans. Driving through the country now, a mile or so from the cemetery, we are okay with being children. The only people in the world weaving around these wind turbines in the ash-white shadow of the Wichitas. We stop the car and kill the idle to hear the world breathe. You sigh. The world is a different place now. I nod, smiling as the late morning sun breaks across the plain and auburn strips between gathered stoic oaks, the withered old white pines. We think we are so free, unaware of the decaying wind that drags the huge white windmills to a somber stillness. This next poem's called The Miracle of Grebes. I don't know if people, I didn't make this up. Grebes actually do run across the water. It's amazing shoulders. People have not believed that in the past, but look on Discovery Channel, see for yourself. It's set in West Virginia. A Miracle of Grebes. The waitress slaps down my tepid halibut. Here you go, honey. I watched the knotted iron bridge saddle a barge that peppers shards of coal into the jury Kanawha. Past the exhaust gate of the Dow plant, several miles upstream, the morning whistle calls the first shift. They pile in like worshipers to mass, the black silos snoring over them. On the restaurant TV, hard-skinned miners talk about the last lamplights dying at Upper Big Branch, which exploded last week, burying 29 of their friends alive. You go with a heavy heart, one says, but you gotta go. The ticker on screen rolls silently as the floodwaters of Logan County strip the Holden homeowner's clothes from him, and he chokes on green wash. Overhead, a helicopter dangles a horseshoe buoy just out of reach. Did the carp dance in those taupe waters just to strand their bones ashore here, picked so clean that turtles pass them over? It's all an illusion, my wife tells me from across the table. The faithful waters splash the same as they have for 4 million years. Spring to summer, summer to fall. Do we matter to its roiling spill? Do I matter to you? If I don't necessarily resent her, I resent the question. Her monochrome prayers supplicate the work week. The world seduces her and bends her spine with age. I bite my lip through cold fish, awash in my illusions. They are daydreams of rising and diving underwater with the grebes on the river, observing their courtship rituals, how precisely they snap their heads to glance at each other, how their eyes never meet, and when the little bird sighs, the other one sighs back at him. Without warning, they burst into wild sprint on top of the water. How can these arch-necked saints save us? Tonight, dogs will howl against our midnight raging. Mountain walls will leer at each other across the great lonely parallel and rip apart the corpse of silence we finally settle on, which swells the air like burnt lead. I will turn my eyes to that smog-addled moon up there, its face grinning at me like a skull on a Baroque tomb. Let's fly from these transient surfaces, love, from our purged shell, our illusory world, its broken pieces. Sail the night stream toward lighthouse arcs over sea caves that collapsed under the ocean's weight, past the throat clearing of straightforward damnation, past the horror of meeting eyes in the early morning blush. I'll race you to the moon and we'll skate its unspoiled surfaces, Grebes' feet touching down, kissing the holy water. This next poem is about Gustav Mahler, who kind of died writing his magnum opus, like his masterpiece, which was called Der Abschied, which means farewell. And so that's the name of the poem, Farewell. It has an epigraph from the piece itself, De lebe erde überall, Blut auf den Linz und Grund aufs Neu, which is German for the sweet earth everywhere, blossoms in the sky, and greens anew. Greens being a verb there. Farewell. Sweet earth everywhere, near the lakeside hamlet of Meyernig in Maria Vorth, rendered at dusk with the dreaming trout fisher sliding over blue glass, set against the Felician parish and round transitory mountains that seem to dissolve into the blue light of distances forever, where Gustav Mahler spent a miserable summer retreating from revolting stagehands. Again in the Via in 1907, where his daughter Maria fell ill with scarlet fever, her tongue a blanched strawberry, she wandered 2 weeks later into blue distances of mourning. The year that followed shuffled Mahler from New York, from victory at the Metro Opera, to a valley at Toblach in the hammock slung between hard green carpeted crags breaking heavenward and a pine forest whispering branches. There he composed Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, the arrhythmia in his chest valves stabbing knives, and the swish of tall autumnal grasses dying in the wind to the tempo of the piece, somewhat withheld in a constant tempo, very quiet, slower still. Because soft deceleration draws out the heart's solitary wandering. Because my friend, fortune in this world was not on my side, his veiled voice choked. And so his strophes and sonata open in a minor key, lift to C major, and fracture into echoes of the Sixth Symphony. Victory and abandonment, the perfect symmetry between scarcity and desire. Then Mahler raises his golden cup and the dark wine spills over. We are all dying, friends. Now for something a little lighter. This poem, I think, pretty much gives all the background that's needed. I'll rush through these last few, sorry. This is called Gene Cockrell's Dinosaur. So that it would give kids on US 83 a landmark and you would always know you're almost home, he commissioned a ton of concrete poured over her pine board skeleton, called her Audrey. Like God snapping his pudgy fingers, Mr. Cockrell set her on the edge of his yard, facing a field that opened into prairie flowers and wild sage. Terra incognita for a concrete brontosaurus, and to my knowledge, she never took a step. When I was a teen, we would cross the state line headed west and hammered on Elijah Craig, raid the ghost towns on Highway 33, rumbling tornadoes rousing the sleepy farmers, never taking much but leaving plenty, till the pot-bellied sheriff's deputies would chase us away. We'd wind up in Canadian, doing the sobriety walk at the tips of our toes along Audrey's wide thorax. I walked at plenty, counting 60 of my size 10s in 92 when she was freshly poured. And one could picture the liftoff of dense thighs as she extended her neck out over the Midwest and on dove-soft cankles and silver-jeweled toes, four-stepped her way to something better. But some force born in her kept her from moving, fear maybe that there's nothing better out there. Or perhaps it was the seasonal comfort of watching ice fields melt into outstretched miles of spring bloom. When the towns are all dead, dried up, the names forgotten, and tumbleweeds pushed by the wind over the Texas panhandle snag in the terrible black frames of oil rigs, become grind over with diesel, are dried at brittle scabs in the boneyards where factory surplus rusts in the sun. When I myself am just ash in that wind, or bones in the earth beneath a headstone solid and dumb as Audrey's chin. When the old ghost architect that dreamed his breath into her may as well have never existed, she, the last of her kind, will remain standing to point you home, younger than me, and inconceivably older, her head tilted slightly to that spot in the landscape she loves, soft gray gaze waltzing above moonlit fields of witchgrass and pink orchids. This is an untitled sonnet. In a hammock's crisscross of truss nylon, she lazes in the progressive shadow beneath a black cypress, grinning with a soft breeze cool on her cheeks, face turned toward me, eyes shut, underarms pelled to cream, and her hair streaked with early strands of white, the muscles of her thighs sprawled against a backdrop of sun-streaked loam. As luna moths seem to dance around in the air, and I dream that age never quite touches her. And then I have three more. This is called Big Bang. There was the dead boy from my part of the city, and I thought I would try to make some sense out of it. Let form shield me from the... His name was Bradley, and he'd been crushed by a 2006 Ford Explorer, roaring through his neighborhood with a drunk driver at its will. He had gone to Western Heights, the same little Oklahoma City mini mall elementary school I went to until I was 8 and the family moved. I wonder if on Tuesday afternoons in July he would bounce to the 7-Eleven and pick up DVDs from the red box and stand on his tiptoes to plunk down $1.78 on the counter for a Slurpee, then make a point to cut through the construction sites, skywalking the 2x4s, what seemed like miles above the red mud, jumping to the high fence at the end, and on the other side, cutting through an overgrown lot, allowing his fingers to pull whatever haphazard thing they encountered along with him, dandelions, fat oak leaves, razor-sharp dicillarian, or dissect seed pods on his way home, discarding it all as it lost its novelty. I wonder if there were candy apples waiting for him in the kitchen. What flashes through a mind so briefly at home on earth as the still screeches and overtakes his life? A fight with his little sister, regret for what he'd never taken back, the consumables he'd amassed in an online game, the shy blink of a crush at school, his mother's smile, our sand-tucked bones in the heart's desert, the never could say it's, the never wills. Days later, I'll read that the researchers out of Wisconsin found a diamond as massive as the sun, corpse of a star 900 light years from our planet, white dwarf in the orbit of a neutron star, not massive enough to explode, so it shed its layers and shrinks away. The star died 11 billion years ago, about 3 billion after the birth of the universe. A compound of carbon and oxygen, each of which has crystallized in the cool 2,000 degrees that radiate from its core. In all the vast stretches of our universe, the researchers say these must all at the same be rare, most of them much too far away from us to detect. And even this one is not yet visible to us. We only know it from the irregular radio bleeps we hear as it pulls the star next to it slightly toward, then away from us. Just off Reno on Meridian Avenue, there is a palm reader's sign in pink neon, always lit. The most interesting thing to catch the eye among the parking lots, doctors' offices, franchise restaurants, and bars. To start this way was a mistake, the pen scratches into paper. Forget irony, forget your guilt, this isn't about you. When the sun would set, the soft glow from downtown would paint the evening skyline with a hot white cornea around the pinked and dusty blue-tinged mass of the city. I wish I could show it to you, little one, before you stepped off the same sidewalk you always had, back turned to traffic and wide eyes on the shadow play of twilight. Drop two more. Come on. This is Clockwork. It's for Christy. That's my little sister. A new year coats the neighborhood in mid-morning frost, turning cars and garden tools to crystal statues. They shimmer, a miniature heaven under gauzy light that burns and reaches but never thaws. Chipping and hammering have become local custom, As Dad did before, so I do it today, memories rushing in with their usual pain. It's good to work if not entirely rational. After all, the sidewalks will freeze again, the trellis give way to aster and bower. The mail carrier will sleepwalk another afternoon in his cream topi. You'll shuffle bills and pick up the kids from school, and as the sun sets, the suburbs will become a spectrum of commuter headlights, neon shimmer and street lamp glow. The mountain's stark obelisks rising from the moonlight shadow with just a sketch of shape, like love, a word our Father only speaks when he's going on about family, about charity and the common man. One I never understood, but in reflection, mirrored from the sheen of his sweat as he became a sort of brazen monument himself in far-reaching rays of sunlight. I think of these things when I see you post praise Jesus at times when some small fortune shines your way. Happy for you, but skeptical of minor miracles. Marcus Aurelius said, generally, wickedness does no harm at all to the universe. I wonder if blessings matter anymore. From the cathedral that serves as centerpiece of our little town, the stained glass tells a story of a God I could never quite assemble. Unfathomable complex of sorrow, here a tooth, a clump of hair, there a chipped ankle bone. Watching the saints flee one by one until finally he cries out that even his Father has forsaken him. A thick silence, his only answer. The merciless universe moves on, constellations sprawled from edge to edge. From a shining ruby pane, the Messiah offers me a small and shriveled shrug. This is the last poem. Kind of a counterpoint to that one. The Angel of Bethesda in Central Park. It has an epigraph by Robert Creeley. Pain is a flower like that one, like this one, like that one, like this one. Moored and solemn, you'll watch her ascend as the fountain swells. Callous mast bound beneath her surging sacred body. Scavenge a feathered glare from the swirl of sun and stretch of wings. Below, weevils choke the concrete, scrounging scattered grains, hollow, gutted, wrapped. Freed from this fall, she'll take lavish flight on thunder pills. Her platinum pinions flutter higher, and you, silent but in thrall of that unstrung echo's limpid August fire, will pray some outstretched palm lifts you gently to the promise of mercy in a stranger's downcast eyes, bright rainwater spinning back to earth. Thank you.